Good evening and welcome, and I'll call this meeting to order. And if we could please start with a moment of silence for prayer or reflection. Thank you.
First up, we have adoption of the agenda. I do know that we will be adding an item under our notice of motion section, item 6.1. Councillor Friesen will be bringing forward a notice of motion on community warmth.
Thanks. Any other additions? Seeing none.
Next, we have adoption of the minutes from our last meeting on August 3rd.
Any errors? Omissions? All right, seeing none.
Moving on now to our presentation tonight. Our presentation is from Invest Medicine Hat for their mid-year update. We have Eric Van Enck and we have Chris Parrott, who is the Director of Land Development and Real Estate, Invest Medicine Hat. Thank you.
Welcome, Eric and Chris. You have the floor.
Thank you, Council. I'm going to start with slide number 3, entitled Invest Medicine Hat, Mission and key, Mission Statement, basically, and Key Activities. So this is just kind of a high-level overview slide. And our mission statement is effectively IMH will support and grow the local economy. In accomplishing that goal, the major activities include creating a long-term economic development strategy, playing a leadership role in growing the regional economy, which I think will be one of the themes of today's presentation. And then other items in terms of marketing Medicine Hat to attract new investment, and a key point that Chris will speak to in more detail, which is de-risking, developing, marketing, and selling city-owned land. Moving on to slide 4. This is a really key slide. It's a bit busy. There's a lot going on here, but the key message of this slide is that our mandate, from our perspective, is to accomplish the key priorities set out by Council. And although we think we touch on several more key priorities than what are listed here, what we've tried to do here is really provide the highlights, I guess, of what we've accomplished in the last 6 months and what we are looking to continue to accomplish. So I'll highlight a couple of these, looking at items like 1.7, optimizing Ngpr's asset portfolio. What we're doing in that regard, we're looking at ways to integrate current city assets into the longer-term economic development strategy of producing hydrogen, and looking at potentially donating some of the city assets, abandoned wells, compression, seismic, things like that, that are currently not providing value within Ngpr, and actually converting those into a working interest in a JV for a CCUS project. There's lots of things to highlight on this slide, but I would say, another one that I think is worthy of note would be land banking and assembling properties, number 2.3, with prioritized areas, specifically downtown in the River Valley. And as Council is well aware, we've been working very, very hard to establish an incentive policy, and one of those incentives is establishing a waterfront district, and trying to reach that critical mass of having a vital downtown and a vital waterfront district, and that includes encouraging residential. Our view is unless downtown has a critical mass of residents, you're never going to reach a real vibrant downtown. You need people living there that care about their community, and that is one of the key purposes of that incentive program. I'll probably leave the rest for you to peruse, but once again, the key takeaway here is that we believe our mandate at IMH is is to accomplish the key priorities set out by council. Moving on to slide 5. This is one of the key priorities from an economic development standpoint in that, we're not looking to develop economic development opportunities on a one-off basis. We're looking to have a longer-term strategy, have a bit of a cluster strategy to reach critical mass in certain areas. And, one of the key areas, the key existing areas within the city is petrochemicals. And Medicine Hat is identified by the province as one of the 5 clusters for the petrochemical industry. And that's for a number of different reasons, but you'll see, world-class companies like CF Industries, Methanex, and CanCarb are already located here. You have excellent access to rail. And, some of the strategies that we're looking to deploy are basically building off those existing strengths within the city. Moving on now to the hydrogen hub and establishing Medicine Hat as the second hydrogen hub in the country. So what we've done here, the announcement went out Friday, we announced it again today, is that basically announced that we are leading the formation of the country's second hydrogen hub. And in order to do this, we thought it would be prudent to effectively follow what Edmonton had done. They've done an excellent job in establishing the country's first hub. But to actually look to make improvements to basically do a V2 or a 2.0 version and build off the tremendous success that Edmonton has had thus far. And so in order to do that, what we've tried to do is we tried to bring in industry a little bit faster, and we've also highlighted our region's strengths, which is really renewable energy, solar and wind, and the ability to make the transition right to green hydrogen instead of stopping simply at blue. And this is just a nice overview slide, once again highlighting from our perspective that we really believe in order to have success, in order to really move the needle for economic development in Medicine Hat and Southeast Alberta, we need to be a leader. We need to lead and coordinate Southeast Alberta. We're the largest municipality. We probably have the most resources to deploy towards economic development. And to that end, we're very proud to announce, the partners that we have within this hub. You're looking at Western Economic Diversification, which is the federal government. You have the Palliser Economic Partnership. You have the City of Brooks. You have publicly traded companies and large employers here locally, large taxpayers here locally, Methanex and CF Industries. You also have smaller, innovative private companies that we think can really add a lot to the hub. Campus Energy, Rock Point, both of those private companies are out of Calgary, and you have Envoy Energy, which is a really interesting CNG development company out of Ontario. And then you have the regional partnerships, Alberta Innovates, Community Futures. So we've tried to reach out and be as inclusive as possible to ensure success of this hub. So what does this mean for Medicine Hat? As I said earlier, we're trying to play that leadership role in terms of organizing this hub to maximize the impact with provincial dollars, with federal dollars, and really move the needle for the economy, create jobs, and reduce the carbon footprint of the region and the municipality. To that end, the federal government and provincial government have literally earmarked billions of dollars towards these types of projects, towards a lower carbon footprint future, and establishing hydrogen production and establishing carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology in the country. It's key from our perspective to be a first mover or to be at least an early adopter in order to position ourselves well to attract investment, and also to position ourselves well with the federal and provincial government to receive grant money and support. And to that end, the federal government in particular, provincial as well, but they have earmarked literally billions of dollars for these types of projects, and we are well down the path in terms of those conversations. Furthermore, this CCUS technology isn't just required for hydrogen production. It is also required from our perspective in terms of lowering our carbon footprint for our city-owned cogen facilities, for the city-owned gas-fired electricity. It's also required in the conversations we're having with companies like CF and Methanex. They are telling us we need this type of technology in Southeast Alberta in order to, to grow and flourish and compete with other jurisdictions. One of the really neat things that we can do in terms of hydrogen use, sort of low-hanging fruit for hydrogen right off the bat, would be to blend hydrogen into our cogen facilities, have a natural gas hydrogen blend, which would substantially reduce the carbon footprint and the cost, ultimately cost on a tax-adjusted basis or carbon tax-adjusted basis of our local utilities. And the final point on this slide I've already touched on, but once again, if we look at how we differentiate ourselves from Edmonton, from the country's first hub, it really revolves around the prolific nature of the renewable resources in and around Southeast Alberta. And one example of that is the 300 megawatt solar farm that is coming into the city of Medicine Hat. And that really, from our perspective, gives us a huge advantage to make the switch directly to green hydrogen. Of course.
I'd really like you to sort of spread about the effect that both Methanex and CF will feel with very, very high carbon taxes, and whether or not the products that they make can be competitive in countries where they don't have that high carbon tax. And that's why they are so involved, as you had said to us earlier. And I think our citizens should take that to note, that this is trying to save what we've got as well as build on other things. So maybe you could just comment a bit on that a bit more. Thanks.
That's an excellent point. Thank you, Councillor Turnbull. Yeah, I think it's well understood that we live in a hyper-competitive world where companies like a Methanex or CF have the ability to go anywhere. They have the ability. Methanex, as you've likely seen recently, just announced their plans to continue expansion at their Louisiana plant. So we're in direct competition with Louisiana. We're in direct competition with any jurisdiction globally that is looking to attract investment. And in an environment of escalating carbon taxes, we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to look, I think, at what the impact would be to the city of Medicine Hat if we lost a Methanex or if we lost a CF. So this type of infrastructure is required, I think, just to simply maintain where we're at. And then it also, once that sort of sunk cost infrastructure is there, that creates a real competitive advantage and cost advantage going forward in terms of winning more business and convincing, Investment is that we're in weekly, at least weekly, sometimes daily conversations with CF and Methanex and others. And we are getting that feedback from them on a daily basis of what's required, how competitive are we, how can we be doing a better job. And so we are getting that demand pull from those companies that this type of infrastructure is absolutely necessary. And why wouldn't you put your hand up and get to the front of the queue and see if you can get other levels of government to help pay for some of this infrastructure? Okay, I have another slide here, also entitled "What does this mean for Medicine Hat?" And this slide is just basically kind of an educational slide for council, in terms of providing some links to the Transition Accelerator, providing some links to the website for the Edmonton Hub, as well as a bunch of the announcements that have come out of the hub since it was first established. The initial concept, I think, for the Edmonton Hub started to hit the news wires in late 2019, and you can see here now, entering into the end of 2021, they have announced several multi-billion-dollar announcements in terms of blue hydrogen production, as well as they have a neat ATCO blending project, blending hydrogen into natural gas to heat homes. But this is meant to provide a bit of a framework for what we can expect, or what sort of the path that we're looking to go down. Now, this is probably my favorite slide, or one of my favorite slides in the presentation. And I think it's a really, really neat idea of how we can be innovative, show leadership, try to think outside of the box, and look at ways to create new revenue streams for the city, which is really the hydrogen strategy. I mean, effectively, what you're trying to do is look at the gap that was created by oil and gas effectively leaving this basin, oil and gas activity shutting down due to a high-cost basin, and how can we replace that? In this case, the city owns a CNG facility that is underutilized, and we've been approached by a party looking to commercialize the city's fleet for effectively a hub and spoke type strategy where the city CNG station would represent the hub and this private company would build out the spokes. So they've already announced they're building a CNG station by the Trans-Canada Highway near Redcliffe. They've also announced another station being built in Swift Current. And they've also signed contracts with PepsiCo Distribution in Lethbridge. And the way this is going to work is the city, through our CNG station, will be the hub. We will fill all of their above-ground storage, effectively the spokes for this business model. And we will earn basically a royalty or a service fee for each MCF of gas that we sell them. And the really, really neat thing is the federal government is instituting something called Clean Fuel Standards in 2022, proposed legislation, which is based off of BC provincial legislation, which in turn was originally based off of California legislation. But this legislation provides the owners of infrastructure that facilitate fuel switching with carbon credits. And it's an extremely lucrative business in California. Stations that accomplish this in California really don't care about making any money on selling the fuel. The primary business model is actually generating carbon credits. And the neat thing is, with the city owning this station, if we're facilitating fuel switching from diesel to CNG through this hub and spoke model, we would be the ultimate owner of carbon credits and would be effectively creating a new revenue stream for the city with existing assets. So this is something that is really, really exciting, and we'll have more to talk about on this shortly, and probably have another press release out on that hopefully before the end of the year. I'll pass it over to Chris here for his slides.
Thanks. So repositioning the city's development and land portfolio, a big focus obviously over the course of last year. A year ago we had almost 200 residential lots. Today we have 71 worth $8.9 million. The inventory is way down from where it was, but a year ago we had almost a 10-year supply based on current absorption rates, which is a lot of capital tied up effectively in the ground that we want to try to turn over. So pivoting from that high inventory, now we're down to 71 and still servicing that market to a degree, but to much less size of a player. But again, we had at the same time, we had very limited commercial land and virtually no industrial land. Today we have basically no industrial land to sell. So when we talk about some of the economic strategies, and not have a backup of land that facilitate that development, then obviously we're not aligned there. So since then, we're now bringing forward the airport lands to the market here in the near term, as well as concept plans on the east side of the airport that could facilitate some new industrial, kind of that 1 to 3 acre industrial lots, and expanding some of the airside lot capability. We're also advancing the Northwest Industrial District, which I know we've talked about a fair bit, but area structure plans underway. This is going to be a major piece to the hydrogen strategy and the attracting capital and businesses to Medicine Hat, that industrial district. The area structure plan should be done in Q1 of 2022, and then followed by the functional servicing report. So stuff rolling very quickly on that. So we'll be able to have lands available for investment that we're attracting here. And then a large focus on infill lots. Looking at these lots, trying to understand why they haven't been developed, solve those issues, and then those development constraints, and then try to bring those to the market. But strategically repositioning our land development strategy is basically what I'm saying. Repositioning out of what's traditionally been developing greenfield residential lots and aligning it with our economic development strategy and lining it with the IMH overall goals. And it's a bit of what we call like a demand pull instead of a supply push. So previously we would supply land and try to push that residential development. Today the strategy is more of a demand side. So create the industry or attract the industry to the city. With that, the development and the servicing of that industry brings jobs. Jobs bring spending in the community. Ultimately, that brings housing and demand for housing in the community. And down the road, ultimately, develops the houses that we're basically facilitating with our old strategy. So kind of that demand pull instead of pushing the supply side, driving it from the industry. But, with that, the direct land development profits in isolation, if you don't look at combined with the overall strategy, will be substantially less. There's a reason that private industry works and develops, and we are competing with on the greenfield residential land, and why they're not developing industrial lands. So basically, it's the cost of an acre of industrial land compared to the cost of servicing that land. In Medicine Hat, we're about $200,000 an acre, which makes it not very desirable from a private sector perspective. Obviously, very desirable from an economic driving perspective that we have those lands available, but where we're not getting the private dollars in to develop those lands. But very important overall. Where you see the comparison in something like Calgary, where that same acre of land is $800,000 an acre. And we compare that same acre of land in Saskatoon and Regina and Red Deer and Lethbridge, where it's substantially higher than Medicine Hat. So there's two pieces of that. One, we don't make as much profit, but cheaper land also helps us drive and bring economic growth to the city. So it's kind of a push and pull, but so we've got to look at land development in a wholesome piece, not just direct profits that way. One of the biggest focuses, obviously we've talked about a lot, is the downtown district and waterfront district and downtown revitalization. We've been working through that to an extensive degree. And alluded to, the success of that district is going to be attracting people into the downtown core, almost reintroducing the downtown core for people to come and visit, creating event space or reasons for people in the city to come downtown and to the waterfront, and then creating housing units where they live close to the downtown. The strategy is, not new. You see this in almost every other urban setting, but something that's an untapped treasure for Medicine Hat that we haven't exploited, but partly we haven't exploited because of the development of the berm. So years ago when the berm didn't exist and these lands really weren't developable, now with that infrastructure in place, we can really start to realize the potential of that waterfront district. And then some of the characteristics about the waterfront district that as we're building out the theme of the district is, a place for everybody, a journey and a destination, a place like no other, a place that has irresistible energy, and really balancing city life with outdoor lifestyle. That's going to be one of the key pieces of this. When you look at the new kind of world and people working from home or the potential people with technology being able to work in smaller urban centers compared to downtown Toronto or New York, where they can balance that city life with outdoor lifestyle, the waterfront's going to be very attractive for that piece. We've done a lot of work collaborating with our internal departments right now. The next piece is those assessments and reviews are done is an extensive, public engagement piece. But we're trying to do these things so we can have a real fulsome conversation. So we want to make sure we have lots of information about what the effects of development look like so that we can have a really good conversation with the public as that rolls out. And really for people to know that this is a starting point. The waterfront district in this development is we talk about like a generational development, this 20 years plus of development. This starting point is setting the theme and some of the general parameters, but it'll grow and evolve through time and as our city grows and evolves. But two stimulus projects that are underway right now, the town square and the work at Athletic Park, those enhancements are creating and helping with that event space or reasons for people to come into the downtown, into a waterfront district. I want to talk a little bit about Salesforce. I know we've probably talked about that a bit over time, but Salesforce is a digital platform for essentially putting all our city data, moving into more of an information age and using that data to a much more effective piece. We've put a lot of strategic thought into Salesforce itself and building out that database, that platform. Today, we sit where a lot of administrative functions in the past are creating reports at just a click of a button. So we're getting access to information very rapidly, streamlining our processes. It also gives us immediate access to information. So today, I can go out and meet a developer on site with an iPad and bring up all the characteristics of a piece of land, basically right on that iPad, as opposed to trying to go back and email information or gather it out otherwise. So we're able to respond much quicker to land inquiries and look very organized and efficient. I talk a lot about land, but we also use it for economic development, for our leads and opportunities that come in, tracking those, make sure we're following up in a timely manner. And obviously our incentive programs is all done through that Salesforce platform as well. It makes a very auditable process. So a great system. We put lots of time in, and now we're just kind of rolling out with the the reporting and some of the key pieces of it. I put a snippet here of some of the dashboards that we have basically at our fingertips. In the front corner, it talks about total acres, and we categorize that by different land assets. So long-term development land, some of our midterm development land, stuff that's ready to develop, lands that we own that are kind of strategic for municipal purposes, infill. So we can always monitor our basically our portfolio today, whereas before that was really done through spreadsheets and much less effective ways. When we look at that monitoring, I look at that same portfolio by the number of properties and different land uses, classifications by nodes that mirror our municipal development plan in the bottom corner. So lots of different ways to look at the portfolio and report on it to give advice to council and make good decisions. In the bottom corner, the portfolio, I know one of the questions that has been asked a number of times is how many acres of land does the city of Medicine Hat have? And this is just Invest Medicine Hat, almost 7,500 acres of land. And that doesn't include stuff like municipal works and parks. But some of that stuff will or could roll into this Salesforce database in time. So the next step on this is we're going to start putting some kind of notional values to some of that land asset, so you really understand the size of this asset in terms of potential market value. But for the most part, it's strategic value as we roll forward. And just a testimonial here from the Salesforce group itself. It's a very powerful testimonial, really emphasizing how we've attacked this issue. We moved into a digital strategy in a very short time period. And so Salesforce basically uses us as a wave their flag about how quickly a municipality or people can attack this and get this database in use. I know I've talked to lots of other companies, and the implementation strategy is drawn out to 18 months, 2 years, and beyond. And we basically have a pretty functional strategy right now, and it's been, I think, about 10 months. So very good news story there.
Thank you, Chris. So we wanted to talk very briefly about the film industry and developing a new industry for the city of Medicine Hat. And one of our colleagues, John Sokochev, sitting in the audience today, has been instrumental in bringing some of this work to the city and establishing some of the necessary relationships to advance this industry going forward. But this was really a result in January 2020, Alberta's film and television tax credit replaced the previous screen-based production grant, which makes us basically just more competitive. So you've seen a bunch of activity come into play. You saw some of the credit union ads that have been airing frequently recently, and another production I think just wrapped up this week I saw on the news. So there's a lot coming, and I think we've been very proactive. Both John and Kelly Ireland as well have been reaching out, establishing these relationships, and ensuring that the film industry is very well aware of what Medicine Hat has to offer. So this is a really exciting new industry that we're going to continue to work on going forward. We wanted to briefly touch on, moving on now to slide 19, we wanted to briefly touch on our COVID response. Obviously, this has been a very, very challenging couple of years here now, dealing with COVID. And, council, I think, was very innovative and very effective in terms of their response. So to that end, as you're well aware, council approved an $8.2 million assistance package, of which $2 million was to be reinvested into local businesses. Over 150 local businesses received funding. And this is, this MH Big grant, we just found out last week, it hasn't been announced yet, but we have won a very prestigious provincial award for supporting local businesses. And, based on our preliminary analysis, all of this money, or the vast majority of this money, was spent on local contractors. And there was an initial leverage effect as well. So for every dollar that we gave out, private industry added about 50 cents. So you're getting that nice leverage effect right off the bat, and then you're also getting an economic multiplier effect in terms of the number of local jobs that are supported through local contractors, and all of those spin-off effects in terms of spending that multiply through the local economy. So we're very happy with how that program evolved. And like I said, we're very honored to have won a provincial award that will be announced shortly. Next slide is just, once again, a very powerful testimonial that I would encourage you to read from Stacey Steele. But we do believe all the feedback that we've received, all the analysis that we've done on a preliminary basis indicates that this was a very successful response by council. Moving on now to slide 21. Another aspect of our COVID response was Shop YXH. And once again, Kelly Ireland, who's sitting in the audience here today, was instrumental in terms of building out this program in partnership with Apex Alberta, Community Futures and Entrecorp, the Chamber of Commerce. Basically it was a significant initiative to digitize local business. And the fact that we were collaborative regionally to deliver this digitization allowed us to secure a $250,000 investment from the provincial government. Once again, this initiative supported 150 regional businesses to build out an e-commerce presence. This particular initiative has won 2 provincial awards. The Economic Developers of Alberta Annual Awards of Excellence, and another award from the province that will be announced shortly. This slide just gives you a little bit more input or background on Shop YXH in terms of the impact that it's had. Now, moving on to the incentives program. Which this year was the first year ever that the City of Medicine Hat adopted a formal incentives policy. We obviously worked very closely with other departments to try to develop that policy. I would say it's going very well overall. It's not perfect. I would admit that there are some modifications and some improvements that can be made, and that is our commitment to come back to council with those suggestions at a later date. However, from a high level, what I'd like to point out is on the Waterfront District Vibrancy Incentive, that grant amount was initially at $400,000. We increased it to $800,000 by borrowing $400,000 from next year's builder incentive program. That was a tweak that we wanted to do based on the demand we were seeing on the Waterfront District Vibrancy Incentive, and also with the intent to reach a critical mass with respect to establishing a waterfront district and establishing that sought-after vibrancy for downtown Medicine Hat. Furthermore, the view is that the builder's incentive was really more of a COVID response. I look at all of these incentives basically along a continuum from a pure investment on one end all the way to a COVID response on the other end. The builder incentive is definitely more towards the COVID response, and our view was to borrow from money allocated next year for that response with the view that it would not be required, and to add that to this year's Waterfront District Vibrancy Incentive. You can see the housing incentive, the grant amount there for 2021 is $1.5 million. We have a reserved amount of approximately half of that. Builder incentive, again, is approximately, it is exactly half allocated. The infill incentive as well, a reserved amount of $125,000 and a budgeted amount of $300,000. And then we have two brownfield tax incentives that are currently in the application process as well. So total number of applicants of 52, total reserved amount of approximately $1.7 million on a revised budget of $3 million for 2021. So we wanted to do a quick case study to show you basically our analysis process and how we think about the incentives program. And just based on demand and the fact that we upsized the program, we thought that it would be prudent to do a quick case study and a walkthrough on the Waterfront District Vibrancy Incentive. So based on the applications we've received so far, property owners receiving $800,000 in incentives will spend approximately $2.6 million. So you're getting that leverage effect once again, because this application it's a really neat incentive in that it's a matching incentive. So if you are an owner of a property in the Waterfront District, you can apply to the city for up to $50,000 matching. And what we're finding is in a lot of cases, some projects, they're maxing out to $50,000, but these projects are actually spending $400,000 or $500,000. So you're getting that significant leverage right off the bat in terms of private spending. We also use world-class economic development and sort of macroeconomic modeling software called Ngpr to basically model what the overall impact is to the local economy with a number of different assumptions. But in this case, we would find a total business-to-business economic impact for the local economy of $5.6 million, which directly and indirectly supports 31 jobs. And once again, I think this point is very, very key, but from auditing the receipts, we can see that the vast majority of these dollars are being spent locally through local contractors. So that's kind of one side of the coin. The other side of the coin that we like to do is just more of the hardcore math of an NPV or IRR analysis on the actual tax consequences of granting these types of incentives. So we use a real example here where this applicant maxed out the grant at $50,000. Their current property taxes were just over $22,000. Other way around. The current property taxes were just over $18,000. The expected taxes going forward are just over $22,000. That delta, that difference of just under $4,000, if you use a discount rate of 6%, that gives you an NPV of $17,000 and an IRR of 9.2%. So, if you look at that investment and you say, this is a perpetuity going forward, this increase to the tax base will continue going forward. And then you look at that relative to, let's say, a return you would get in the bond market currently of, 2% or less. We think that this is a very good use of taxpayer dollars. Now, we thought it would be fun to take a bit of a step back and take a quick look at Aurora. Obviously, this has been a controversial subject that predates my time with the city. And I don't have a horse in this race because I didn't do any of this analysis, but I thought it'd be fun to go back and take a look and kind of see where we're at. So the history of the Aurora incentive or subsidy, the city granted $6 million, just over $6 million, to build a world-class greenhouse and production facility. It has been quite widely criticized, which we want to get into the details here a little bit. Effectively, in this case, we believe it's basically a worst-case scenario. So you've incentivized a large publicly traded company to build a world-class facility in your jurisdiction. To do that, you've basically given them $6 million or a $6 million subsidy to build the required sort of infrastructure build-out to locate their plant here. And then ultimately, the plant was never commercialized. So, it's been widely criticized because a bunch of jobs were supposed to come and a bunch of economic spin-off was supposed to occur that has not happened. And so what we wanted to do is just look at that from a pure math perspective and look at what that worst-case scenario looks like for the taxpayers of Medicine Hat. I think there's some other key points here that should be made. I think, the other city departments, utilities, et cetera, I think did an absolutely fantastic job based on my analysis in terms of risk management procedures, looking at take-or-pay contracts in terms of the utilities, looking at, posting money to pay for their required portion of the infrastructure build-out. And, so from all of those perspectives, you now have a world-class facility where the company paid for their infrastructure build-out that is sitting there, that is up for sale, that will likely be purchased by someone else and lead to additional economic growth and additional jobs down the road. So under that worst-case scenario, a $6 million incentive has resulted in an annual increase to the city's tax base of $1.27 million. So those lands were privately held prior to, and the tax department has confirmed that they were paying $130,000 a year of taxes, and the current annual taxes on that land and facility are $1.4 million. So we look at that $1.27 million increase to the tax base, and we look at that as the minimum expected increase given the facility has never been commercialized. And then we also look at an upside scenario, assuming that the facility is commercialized in 2025. So under this worst-case scenario taxpayer return, the easiest way that I can frame this, I think, to the public is, would you be willing to pay $6 in order to receive $1.27 per year for the rest of your life or in perpetuity? And that's basically what the city did. They put $6 up. They're getting increased taxes of $1.27 a year. And once again, that's in a worst-case scenario where a plant has never been commercialized. So under those assumptions, once again, using a discount rate of 6%, which is more than double your return in the bond rate in the bond market currently, you have an IRR of incentives of just over 22%, and an NPV of $13.3 million. Once again, you have an undiscounted payback period here of less than 5 years, which is in a worst-case scenario, and substantial upside in the case that the plant is eventually commercialized. Which leads into the next slide, which is what does this look like if it is commercialized? What is the upside? So once again, we've gone back and forth with the tax department to sort of see if our assumptions are conservative or accurate. And we've used the actual taxes paid for years 2019 to 2021 in the model. We have assumed $1.4 million for 2022 to 2024. And then we've assumed $3.3 million for the years 2025 to 2049, which once again is an estimate coming from the tax department, assuming that the facility would be commercialized in 2025. So, basically, we've established what the baseline sort of worst-case scenario case looks like from a pure return perspective. And in this upside scenario, your IRR goes to almost 31%, and the NPV, once again, using a 6% discount rate, is almost $32.5 million from your investment of just over $6 million. So that's just the pure math on the tax side. There is also obviously, from just a common sense point of view, there is substantial upside to the local economy from the construction impact. Once again, predating my time, but the city did commission a 2018 study which showed a one-time construction, the effect of a one-time construction impact of a $150 million facility. And then according to the literature that we've read, the actual spending for Aurora Sun was actually more like $260 million, or almost double that amount. But once again, going back to that $150 million CapEx assumption, you have a $146.2 million gross output in terms of the impact of the local economy from that spending. You have total GDP from construction of just over 62 million, and you have supported 413 jobs, creating a labor impact of over $38 million from the construction of that facility. And I think we know anecdotally that the construction of that facility supported a lot of restaurants and hotels and other businesses in the region. Finally, on Aurora, they have listed this for sale through Toronto-based Colliers International. On their website, their targeting closing date is late Q2, early Q3. The concept here again is kind of like being the second or third owner of a golf course. Aurora obviously made some mistakes in terms of their projections of the cannabis business. They overbuilt their capacity, their ability to produce. But that is a world-class facility that will be commercialized by somebody at some price at some time. So with that, I'm happy to open the floor to questions.
Excellent and very thorough presentation. Thank you very much, guys. Councillor Hirsch.
Well, Your Worship, I don't even know where to begin. That's a massive deck, lots. And the funny thing is, it's only your mid-year review. I would actually, the viewing public, we talk a lot about invest, but we never talk about the people within. And I would just challenge people to start looking at the horsepower behind invest, and you'll get blown away with the talent that's in this room. So I just want to congratulate you guys, everyone, Kelly, John, Chris, Eric, you guys are just, for such a small team, look at the mighty power you guys are creating. It's just unbelievable. And we always talk about big dreams, big ambitions, and here we are. So I'm just ecstatic, obviously, and I'm probably the choir. I always speak highly of Invest, but quite frankly, the proof is in the pudding. Where else? And they say imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. And I don't know if many people know this, but Invest Medicine Hat, if you go on the Invest Alberta website, it's a carbon copy of us. So well done, and I certainly appreciate the efforts. Invest is actually consistently and never varied off the strategic priorities of this council. We asked, and you guys delivered. In addition, you look at, we took, I'll start with the where else can you take $100 million liability potentially in our Ngpr and turn that into a potential $100 million asset? I challenge anybody to step forward and try to make that happen. The carbon capture, the initiative that's going on is absolutely breathtaking. The pivot in the land and properties, we were an owner. We were an owner of land, and the phone would ring and we would talk. But where else have you guys actively marketed, looked in terms of how the City of Medicine Hat can be a complementary player in this market, and decided strategically to go into commercial and in industrial with the whole idea of that's not a very lucrative market for one, but what does it do? It drives economy. It brings business. And what does that do? It brings jobs. What will that do? It creates the housing market on the residential side that you're seeing all day long. And the numbers, again, are not lying. So I do want to get into that. Salesforce, again, you talk about a land and properties. We kind of knew what we had, but to digitize it, to put the effort that you had and did is kind of like we had a horse and carriage, and now it feels like we got a Ferrari, quite frankly. So, you know, again, well done. The biggest takeaway for me, and maybe Eric, I'll go on to you, is that this hydrogen and the carbon capture and everything related, blue hydrogen and the green, it's all very relatively foreign to us and the viewing public. Can you maybe describe to us what the announcement means, what's the ramifications, and maybe a preamble as to what steps were you taking behind the scenes, quite frankly, because this just came out of the blue, well, of course we knew. But can you give us a little history of that? What does this mean? And we are talking about investment, and you go to that slide, you're talking about billions with a B. So this is a game changer. Can you help me understand where it came from and where we're going?
Thank you, Councillor Hirsch. Yes, happy to do so. So the concept of establishing Medicine Hat and more broadly Southeast Alberta as a hydrogen hub really came from a strategy session that we had at Invest Medicine Hat towards the end of last year. And we hold these strategy sessions either weekly or bi-weekly. And you know, what often happens in economic development, and what I've found, I've been with the city for less than a year, but what I've found within a municipal environment is you're responding to inquiries. And what that does is really puts you down the path of sort of doing one-off economic development. I'm going to develop this parcel of land, or I'm going to try to bring in this greenhouse or this hotel. And that's all fine and good, but it doesn't move the needle in terms of really repositioning the economy. And, you know, if we look at what has happened to Southeast Alberta and the city of Medicine Hat, the city used to be a hub for oil and gas services. We used to be a major producer of natural gas specifically. And, you know, with the downturn of the oil and gas sector in this province since 2014, activity levels have come back up in certain basins. You know, you're looking at the Montney, the Duvernay, the more prolific basins. However, you know, the city of Medicine Hat sits on at what was at one point a TCF of free gas that was found by the CP Rail in the late 1800s. And that gas created a tremendous amount of prosperity for this city and this region. But that gas is effectively gone, as we all know. So what we thought is, can we think bigger? Can we think more strategic, longer term? How can we move the needle for this economy and position ourselves a little bit differently instead of just responding to inquiries and being more strategic in terms of outreach and strategy around how do we work with the federal government? How do we work with the provincial government? How do we work with industry? Yeah, so that's the basic sort of thought process behind it. Now, in terms of the impact, you know, if we look at just one aspect of this strategy, which is CCUS or carbon capture, utilization, and storage, the analogous project is called Quest. It's owned by Shell in Northern Alberta. That project was a $1.2 billion project just in and of itself. And that is an absolute world-class, world-leading project that the province and the rest of the world is looking at to emulate going forward to lower the carbon footprint through CO2 injection. We believe that infrastructure is absolutely essential for the city of Medicine Hat and for the region, not just for the production of hydrogen, but also for reducing the carbon footprint of our power plants, of our electric generation facilities, as well as to help sustain and grow the industrial base. So I touched on the concept of Medicine Hat being one of 5 industrial petrochemical clusters within the province. So that means that we have companies like CF and Methanex and CanCarb that have chosen to locate here historically from the perspective of having low gas prices effectively is what brought them here. But now that is no longer the case going forward, we have to look at how do we strategically position ourselves to ensure that business stays here, ensure that we are competitive with other jurisdictions, other large petrochemical jurisdictions such as Edmonton, such as Louisiana. And if we can be at the front of this queue, if we can put our hand up to the federal government, the provincial government and say, we're showing regional leadership here. We are bringing together public companies, private companies, Palliser Economic Partnership, City of Brooks. We're bringing all these partners together. We're all rowing in the same direction. That's what the federal government wants to see. That's what the provincial government wants to see. They don't want to just deal with the City of Medicine Hat or the City of Brooks or the County of Cypress. They want to deal with a region that is coordinated and moving in the right direction, and that's the overall strategy, what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh?
Thanks, Your Worship. Great presentation, gentlemen. As a taxpayer, I am thrilled to hear all of the pieces of this puzzle that are slowly coming together. My question relates to that word you brought up a few times, incentive, and how incentive has helped this city bring projects here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Aurora that maybe hasn't reached the potential that some of us wanted. Sometimes the community, I think, doesn't see the bigger picture in that we're in competition with cities all over this country, all over North America. And for Little Medicine Hat to provide an incentive to attract big companies is a big deal, and something that I, looking back at Aurora, I would do again today. Now, the question I have from a taxpayer perspective, it's been 3.5 years since that decision was made, and the public is seeing the ROI today. How do we do a better job as we move forward, getting that information out to people as we are talking about incentives for future opportunities?
It's an excellent question, Councillor McIntosh. Thank you. It's really what we're trying, your point gets to what we're trying to do with the current incentives program, and that is working with the city's tax department, looking at what current taxes are paid, looking at what the development is, taking a conservative view of what that means to the increased tax base, and then continuing to refine and get smarter on how we structure our incentives to ensure that the taxpayer is receiving a return. So once again, going back to the Aurora example, I think the city actually did a fantastic job, quite frankly. Once again, predated me. I'm not taking any credit for it. But in terms of how they went about risk management, because, that size of a deal, there's a ton of risk. You're building out millions of dollars of energy infrastructure for a facility. But in all aspects of what the city did, once again, in terms of ensuring that Aurora would pay for their portion of the utility upgrade, putting take-or-pay contracts in place, and I think taking a pretty conservative view of what their return would be with respect to the incentive. Those are all the types of things you want to do. You always want to err on the side of conservatism and caution. Our goal is to continue to evolve those models, evolve that analysis, so that we are ensuring we're creating that link between providing the incentive and receiving that increase in taxes. So it starts to look more like an investment than an incentive. That's the ultimate goal.
So just to follow up, is there a plan for future incentives to get that information out to people quicker, get it out to the taxpayer whose dollars we're using to incentivize development?
Thank you, Councillor McIntosh. Yes, the answer is yes. We are doing that analysis now. One of the examples that was provided here was for the Waterfront District Vibrancy Incentive. And once again, what we want to do going forward is some of the incentives, to be quite frank with you, are very nicely correlated to an increase in taxes. Others are less so. And so what I would like to do going forward is sort of migrate the program so that they all look a little bit more like an investment and a little bit less like an incentive. That's sort of the ultimate goal. But that is something that we will commit to do, come back to council, show you this analysis on a program by program basis, and also come back with suggestions in terms of how we can improve.
Thank you. Councillor Turner?
Thank you, Your Worship. Gentlemen, thank you for a very informative presentation. I'm really happy to see that you did this breakdown on the Aurora initial incentive we gave and what that meant to our community in dollars. Yes, there's a large greenhouse sitting there empty, but I have much hope that it won't be empty for too much longer. One of the things I really appreciate about our Invest Medicine Hat group, in the past, when I was first on council, we would have proposals come to us, and really, we didn't have the proper analysis or business case completed on some of these things. And now we have a team of experts, particularly you, Eric, who's had many years of experience in doing many $100 million deals. So you can look at a project and you can give us analysis, and so we can actually determine whether, if we're giving a particular incentive, whether that incentive is really going to pay off for the taxpayers of Medicine Hat. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the land side of the presentation. And so with what we've done with putting all this land into Salesforce, where are we at with this? Do we have most of it in there now, or are we sort of halfway through it, or?
Yeah, no, most of the land is in there now. So all the lands that Invest Medicine Hat is kind of managing, all that sits in our portfolio now. And it's more or less all done, all the classification. So now we're able to go out right now to talk to investors and basically have immediate access to the data and to create reports for council. And like I said, administrative reports and process, it's all in place now.
So eventually, will we have all this land on a website somewhere where all the local realtors can have a look at it as well? Because obviously, probably not every business opportunity that comes to Medicine Hat would come to you folks. It might come to a, local commercial realtor. I would love to see that they have access. They can just go online and they can have the same information that you have. I mean, rather than have 4 guys working for the city, let's have, I think there's 150 realtors here. Not all of them are commercial ones, but if we got, 10 commercial guys working, why not? I mean, I think our goal is to sell land.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So of all the lands that are in there, you'll notice in some of the charts, lots of it is long-term development land, mid-term development land. But the pieces that are ready for development, and as we're ready to bring them to the market, the whole intent is to share it locally and even abroad to bring as much investment attraction and exposure to the lands as we can.
And I'm really happy to see finally, after me complaining about it for 7 years, we finally have some industrial land being developed in the north. And I'm just wondering, do we have any plans to develop any just regular commercial land up in the north part of the city as well? There's just one really small development there, where the co-op is. I don't know, do we have other land around there that we could develop for just commercial, not industrial?
Good point, yep. So there's some pieces that go more like a business industrial instead of a light industrial.
That's what I'm thinking of,
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. So the Briar Run has some of that in there. The south part of our new Northwest Industrial Part will be more of that business industrial. So you'll see some of those details as the area structure plan comes out.
Do we have a time frame on, is this all part of that same industrial that's all gonna come out at the same time?
Yeah, so Q1 2022, we should have the area structure plan brought forward to council, and you'll see the zones. So as lots of it is heavy industrial, but to service that, we're creating business industrial zones as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Turnbull?
Thank you, Worship. I really like a couple of things you said. I really believe in land banking as well, rather than being a developer. That gives us the opportunity as a city to control who and how we build our city if we don't have that land to control. So I really like that. I also like the investment versus incentive. I think that's exactly right. We are actually investing money for a return. And sometimes when you play the market, sometimes you don't get as much return as you like, but we're not actually taking those kinds of risks. We have a much, much better risk management on that. The other thing is, Jim brought it up here a minute ago, but you are professionals with successful experience. And that's the difference. We've had an economic development in our city for years, but we've never had the likes of Invest Medicine Hat with the two of you, Jason, and your team. It's amazing what you have done in such a very short time. So my stance on the report, by the way, was almost overwhelming. I'm so giddy here, I'll just have to go home and have to take something to calm myself down. But this is the start for me of a new economic stimulus that our city has wanted and needed for such a long time. Our city is now on the forefront of a new and clean energy source to replace, as you said, our oil and gas industry. So my compliments to you, Jason and Eric, Chris, your whole team, but also to our city manager, who has been the driving force to bring Invest Medicine Hat back into the city, tear it down, rebuild it, bring on the right contractors, as you guys are, and to Brad Maines and our total senior leadership team, who has been working on this for almost 2 years. And the success that we've had with our leadership team and yourselves is overwhelming. And so my compliments to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Samraj?
Thank you, Mayor Luxton. Actually, before I was on council, I remember sitting up in the gallery listening to the Economic Development Alliance get grilled by council at that time. I think what I learned then is economic development is iterative. We keep learning and we keep moving forward there. I think your presentation highlights a number of things that are strengths of what Invest Medicine has been able to do, especially with regards to coordinating, facilitating investment attraction, like the hydrogen hub, which sounds very promising, or reforming our land department and marketing our city for new ventures like the film industry. But the Aurora Sun deal, I mean, it does highlight the kind of good and the bad of this. I think the good is definitely what the previous council did, was they gave specific instructions and they gave professionals the opportunity to kind of go and attract that investment. The bad is it has to do with the subsidy that we gave them to get them here. I would say that my colleagues in your slides misunderstand the controversy a little bit. It's the problem. It's not just about whether the taxpayer was made whole after that investment. The question is of the investment in general, because by their nature, government incentives are limited. And so the question is, who gets those incentives? And whether those deals could be done without them. As Councillor McIntosh pointed out, we're living in a brutal economic environment where competition between cities is pretty stiff. So, you know, the use of incentives, I agree, is necessary on occasion, although they do raise concerns for me. But that is the way that things are currently. So I think we have made good progress here, but we definitely have a lot of work left. But thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Dumanowski?
Well, Your Worship, a lot has been said. First of all, I want to thank you for your mid-year report update. Very informative. As Councillor Turnbull said, it does bring optimism. There is lots to be excited about. What I started to write down here as I was reflecting on some of the comments in your presentation, and what we're seeing is in the 20 years that I've sat around this table, contrasting the economic development goals, KPIs, or key performance indicators and outcomes 20 years ago to today, the outcomes in general haven't changed. People want to see our community grow. They want our community to prosper. They want it to be vibrant. They want it to be a community that is ideal to live in, and they want jobs. But what has changed, certainly, is the industry vernacular, the ability to be nimble and proactive in the ways that you're doing it. And it's not, it's not let's accept a mid-year update and then bring a lot of attention to the Erics, Chris's, and Jason's and others of the world who are Invest Medicine Hat, who are doing this. But the truth is, without that talent, we couldn't be here. And so I would be remiss if I didn't add to that conversation. So certainly my voice is there. For me, it's kind of like contrasting or talking about a floppy disk to iCloud storage. It has changed. It has changed. It is remarkable. But the true joy or giddiness comes out of what you see coming to fruition and what is being realized. And when I look at, as you prefaced, council's priorities, and it's nice to sit here and say, well, I guess that's me. I'm on council. I was a contributor to that. We're all here contributing as voice of the community and identifying the needs and wants and desires, and then trying to digest or distill that to some strategies and goals that now you and others can work from. So it is an absolute honor to have this council be part of that conversation, but you took it to the next level. So very quickly, obviously the hydrogen hub, as Councillor Hirsch said, it's a game changer, absolutely incredible. I will even go so far as to say, mark this moment on our city's historical timeline. This will be significant. The CNG commercialization that you talked about, creating revenue streams, everything, any business, a lot of these incentives about return on investment and what kind of new revenues can you generate. It's no different than the provincial government's trying to grapple with, or the feds, is things are changing. So what's the next best thing? How do we create revenue and replace revenue from traditional ones that we felt we could depart from? The Riverfront District Downtown Revitalization, obviously that has been on council's agenda for forever, but the Riverfront kind of piece as it ties into downtown is not new, but it seems to have grown legs on a significant level of late. And as you said, it's, even when you talked about taking next year's incentives and bringing it over because that critical mass so that you could see it, not just kind of be token, that you see it realized. Incredible. One of the benefits or otherwise of being on council a period of time is that you hear from a lot of people and they know you, and so they let you know their opinions. And I've heard just incredible things about that initiative for Riverfront. And even the fact that we're able to leverage things like incentives and benefits, it was again, language that was either lost to us or was not available to us not so many years ago. So taking that and I think Councillor Trimble said it, not just throwing money there, but saying, where does it stick? Where should we put that money? And where is that return on investment going to be? Couple more things, the MHBIG COVID response, it'd be easy for us as a council to sit here and say, well, we did it because that's the right thing to do. We did do it because it was the right thing to do, but it was necessary and obviously is translating into a return on investment as well. Not just that wasn't the main goal, but to get an accolade or impending accolades from the province and other jurisdictions is news to us and news to me, but is welcome because it says when you take care of your community will take care of itself. And in the end, we're doing what we have to do. But last but not least, and the city land portfolio, you did refer to that demand pull component, and again, responding to land development as necessary. So been around here a while where when we experienced, we used to have 50, 70, 100 lots in inventory, and then we were running short. Now, obviously those times have changed, and maybe we'll come back with some of these announcements, but we were struggling to turn new lots around very quickly as the demand grew very quickly, outpaced even our ability to put those lots out there. So our whole focus, and I get comments from people in the community, some of whom were here many years ago, and many speak to they feel is a veiled threat against our land development, our land holding and development cycle and approach, because it departs from how we've done it for a long time. And when I say that, I mean we're still a landholder, proudly. The citizens of Medicine taxpayers, one and the same, can say we are holders, but we approach it differently, and we partner differently. And in the end, it comes back to support this community in the form of taxation and growth. So although that journey has been different over the last while, it has proven to be well serving our community. My question around that then is, keeping that in mind and trying to be working in partnership with the private sector and selling off, parcels of land or doing the infill, which is absolutely a no-brainer that is being, done by many communities. But how do we balance that? Maybe it seems like a small issue compared to all the big stuff you now say, but how do we reconcile the fact that we have 71 lots and we got lots of things going and cooking here and it all could come ready at the same time, and how quickly and how nimble can we be to respond to a growth initiative? And I'm not saying this because there's an impending election and I'm trying to artificially create excitement. I really believe we will have to be, this community, whoever sits around this council table in the next term will have to be talking about that. And so I just wonder if you have any thought on how we're going to do that and how quickly we can do that.
Thank you, Councillor Dumnowski. So good questions, and I know the history of it, where we worked a lot in the greenfield residential land development. A very risky business. There's a reason that you make good returns on that in the good times, and when you're holding a large portfolio when the economy goes south, then you can understand why it's tougher in the bad times, where we got lots of capital basically tied up in infrastructure that sits there with no return. But again, just like we're talking about with the other stuff, we're talking every day with the developers in the city. We're looking years forward to say what's the city's growth going to look like, where developers and builders are seeing their demand going to be, and where the private sector is going to fill in. And if there's a gap there, then that's when the city will perhaps pivot again with council's direction to respond to those gaps. And maybe it looks in a little different way where we're partnering more with land developers, but we'll respond in that same direction just as we did today. But if the private sector is filling it, then we'll kind of continue with the strategy where the private sector isn't playing, which today is more in the non-residential or commercial and industrial space.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Your Worship, gentlemen. Amazing report. I may not be quite as giddy as Councillor Turnbull, but I really am excited. It's sort of, it's like a new hope, sort of like Phoenix rising out of the ashes, except we weren't in the ashes. But that rising up, or that seizing new opportunities, looking at things in a different way, I see that built into this report and in the work you've done, and I'm quite excited about it too. A couple comments and then a question, and I'll be brief because so much has been said and asked about. In terms of the petrochemical cluster development and the hydrogen hub, I just find that particularly exciting, well, we all do, because it builds on our existing assets, and it builds on our existing and some new partnerships. So we're not in this alone. We're in this together as a group who know we can make this happen. And I just think that's really relevant. And it's the beginning of a new legacy. I think Councillor Vargas said it earlier. I can't quite remember when, but yes, we have the legacy of our gas. And this is, to me, like the beginning of the development of a new legacy. So I'm quite excited about that. A couple of other little comments. I've really pushed the waterfront development. I've always found that to be something that was a missed opportunity for Medicine Hat, a jewel in our community that we hadn't really taken advantage of. And so, again, I'm really thrilled about that opportunity. Want to caution that it won't all happen tomorrow or within the next year. And I think some people, people get excited and then, well, what are you doing? Where is it? Like, what's that all about? And we have to know that that kind of a mega project takes time, but it has an amazing opportunity for us in the future. And then also the impact of the Business Innovation Grant. I was quite taken with that. How you are able to quantify. You can take the grant and you can show how it multiplies and produces results, both financial and with jobs and so on. And I hope that people really read that part, because often they see money expended and they don't see money and opportunity gained. I want to comment you on, I want to congratulate you, the team, on your expertise, and that's been said, that you're able to take, this is the first time in my many years on council that I've seen a team take benchmark data to do the kind of analysis you do, to build a business case, and then show quantifiable results. So that we actually have a tool, like you've made a tool for us to be able to say, okay, if we want to do this, this is what it will look like, this will be the gain, or this is why we should not do this. We've not really had that before. I'm really impressed. You know, you spoke about a goal. I think one of you spoke about your goal towards looking at things as an investment rather than an incentive. I don't know. I would suggest you're already there. So finally, my question. The petrochemical cluster development and hydrogen hub begins with a study that you have the funding for. My question is this. So for Medicine Hat and region really, what does our success look like? You've talked about, like in slide 9, predominantly slide 9, You've said, what does this mean for Medicine Hat? And you cite what happened in Edmonton, so that the great opportunities there. I'm just wondering, would those be the same ones for us? If the study shows something different, what could it be? What are the next steps after the study so that we can pursue this to be as successful as it should be? And sort of what can the public expect in that regard?
Thank you, Councillor Friesen. So to answer your question, I think obviously we're looking at Edmonton being the first hub and trying to provide a bit of a roadmap for where we go from here. That being said, I think there are some important differences that are relatively obvious between ourselves and Edmonton. Obviously, we don't have the refining capacity that Edmonton has. We're a much smaller region with respect to demand. And so that was one of the reasons why we wanted to bring industry in earlier, was to look at, we have some strengths relative to Edmonton, we have some weaknesses relative to Edmonton. I think it was, Edmonton was a very logical first choice for the first hydrogen hub. What are those strengths, what are those weaknesses, and how can we convert them into immediately actionable items? The really, really glaring strength for our region that's coming up is renewable energy. Southeast Alberta is becoming a renewable energy powerhouse. If you look at the amount of solar and wind projects that are on the come in this region, it's a staggering amount. It's an amount that would overwhelm our grid and overwhelm our demand. So ultimately, you can see Southeast Alberta being an exporter of energy. The same way we were an exporter of energy before, oil and gas, we will likely be an exporter of renewable electricity and as well as hydrogen. And what's really neat about hydrogen is it can help bridge that gap between the massive productive capacity of a lot of the solar and wind that's coming online and the fact that the grid might not be capable of exporting that yet. And so hydrogen can really sort of bridge that gap. So I think that's one of the major differences between how I see our hub developing relative to Edmonton. Edmonton is very focused on blue hydrogen. They're very focused on adding blue hydrogen facilities on the back of or in conjunction with the refinery process. Obviously, their proximity to the oil sands as well creates this natural need for very large-scale CCUS to reduce the carbon footprint of oil sands production, because oil sands production basically burns natural gas to heat the bitumen, right? So there's a few of those nuances. One of the people that we brought into the hub is a company called Rockpoint Gas Storage, who is owned by Brookfield. So they have very deep pockets, very deep connections. And interestingly, they actually own the Port of LA through Brookfield. They own a lot of infrastructure in California. And they have some really innovative ideas of how we could be a production hub in Southeast Alberta and facilitate export of hydrogen to the West Coast, to the US, potentially using underutilized pipelines and infrastructure that is already in place. But it's those types of innovative private companies that we're trying to bring into the hub early, because we do recognize we do have some shortcomings relative to Edmonton in terms of just overall population and demand. But if you really want to drive economic growth, you have to be an exporter of something. And, that can be an exporter of services, it can be an exporter of oil and gas, it can be an exporter of anything. But if you really want to move the needle and create wealth for this region, we need to move ourselves likely down the path towards being an exporter of hydrogen. And potentially the sort of early indications are that our hydrogen could look a little greener than others, which would be, I think, beneficial.
All right, thank you again.
Thank you. Councillor Varga?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to dwell on the positives. This whole report has been a positive venture for everybody around this table tonight, and for the people in the audience and on TV. The positive is the team of 7. I'll call you the team of 7 from now on. Maybe that's a good thing that there's only 7 of you, because it seems like if there was any more, we wouldn't get all these things done, because there'd be too many ideas out there. So it's great that you guys have come up with all these avenues for us to make our city better and to improve on what we do have already. And some of the positives I see is that when you talk about Aurora, you've looked at new avenues for how to turn a negative into a positive, and hopefully that comes to fruition in the next little while. With the CNG station, bringing the big guy on point, which you just talked about, Rock Point, to bring them in and getting them excited about Medicine Hat's little plant that we have in the industrial area, and they might come in and make it a big thing of the future, is pretty exciting to our city, and to using that underutilized CNG plant that we have right now. That could be something real special. The big thing is the hydrogen hub. I mean, now that we've got that and we're on our way to starting this thing, 120 years ago, we got excited about finding gas within Medicine Hat. So now all of a sudden, I think this is a new era for us with the hydrogen part, where we can store some carbon capture utilization storage. We can do some CCUS, which you keep talking about, which is great for our community, where we use our existing resources that we have and make it even better now. So, I mean, it's a big deal. And I think one of the biggest parts is that you're not doing it alone. You've invited a bunch of partners into this that are important partners for the future of our community, and you've made it possible for them to become part of a bigger unit. And hopefully we become bigger than Edmonton, like I said earlier. I hope we can be even better than what Edmonton is, right, with what we have down in the southern part of Alberta. And the big thing to me is that there's only 2 of these in Canada, and we're one of them. So until somebody else comes along to be the 3rd one, we're still number 2, right? And hopefully we can compete with the number 1, and we're right in the same province. So I think it's important that the people realize this is something for the future, something to get excited about. I think it's a good news story. I think your report's all positive for all the things that you're doing, whether it be in land or new ventures that you're going into. You're making everything better for things here, and you're looking for innovative ways to make money within our community and to sell off some of our assets that we do have. So I think it's a great story, and I hope Medicine Hat welcomes the new era that we're going into here in the future. I think it's important to realize that we can't stand still. We have to move into the future, and some things have to change. So I'm looking forward to bigger and better things that you've already done so far. So thank you for being such a great team, the team of 7.
Councillor Turner?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just another question just sort of came to mind. So the study that we're going to do with our partners, has that started, and when is the proposed ending of that? When is it going to be completed?
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Yes, it has started. It is being facilitated through a group called the Transition Accelerator, which is based out of the University of Calgary. They are the same group that completed all of the academic work behind the formation of the Industrial Heartland Hub in Edmonton. And so their lead engineer has already been, they've been to our office. Chris and I actually drove him around the city and showed him all the sites, showed him the greenhouses and the industrial park and the wind turbines and Equidale and just about everything else we could show them. But so they've been here. They are starting to gather their data. They've done a similar, I guess, sort of exercise with the city of Brooks and the county of Newell. So that work is already started, basically in data gathering mode, and the expectation is that the study would conclude in early 2022, and that would provide the framework, basically the framework or the goalposts for establishing the hub and moving forward from there. But our strategy is not to wait for the results of the study, but we've had this sort of parallel path strategy we've been pursuing for quite a while. With being cognizant that going down the path of a pure CCUS, going down the path purely on the hydrogen hub could create bottlenecks for the other strategy. And there is overlap. There's overlap in partners. There's overlap in execution. But we have made that cognizant choice to keep them parallel paths and to continue advancing both. So. Like I said earlier, I think we are hopeful that we will have another announcement in the short term, hopefully later this fall, with respect to CCUS and the strategy there. The partners that have been engaged, it's very, very exciting. There's only going to be a few of those hubs in the province as well. The province has made it very clear from a regulatory perspective that they do not want dozens and dozens of CCUS projects in the province. They want, maybe half a dozen large projects on a regional basis. And so, we're going down that path very methodically to ensure that the city is included in that infrastructure that we see as very, very important. So to answer your question, the study will conclude in early 2022, but we're not going to wait for that to continue to advance. What we see are sort of low-hanging fruit, actionable items that are coming out of this hub. The first is likely an announcement in and around CCUS. The second is likely an announcement around the commercialization of the CNG facility and building a new business model around carbon credits on the back of that.
Yeah, thank you. You answered my second question too, so perfect.
Thank you. Councillor Turnbull?
Thank you, Your Worship. Everybody talks about incentives, but where would solar and wind be without government incentives? And why is it that big companies, because of carbon tax, jeopardizing their ability to be profitable, why are they buying all kinds of energy from these very solar and wind companies? Because they get the green credits to offset the carbon so that they, again, can be economical in the production of their company. So, and I know you mentioned in talking about that, because I think that's an important aspect of why governments would like to see hydrogen, because it's the newest, cleaner source of energy, and it gives off zero emissions. Yes, you can do it two ways, right? By renewable, which unfortunately is a bit more expensive. Blue is cheaper as long as you have carbon capture, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, and the reason, and maybe you could pick up on this because you're much more knowledgeable than I am, but the reason they don't want too many areas of carbon capture, especially closer to bigger cities, is that CO2 cannot be released in large quantities, right? I mean, if you're working in a greenhouse, you can sub a little extra CO2 in there. Why? Makes the plants grow greener. Mm-hmm. But if you flood it too much,
no more oxygen.
Yeah, it's no more oxygen, right? So, but I just always find it really interesting that the games that are being played run by two things, and that is carbon tax and climate change. And it's not going away, as much as we all have different opinions on that. Governments are absolutely penned in. No government in this country will ever get elected by saying climate change is not a reason. It's there, and that's not going away. And so we have to learn, as you said, to operate with a different set of and right here for our own production of electricity. All right, as the price of carbon goes up, and I've seen some of the numbers that we project what it will cost our citizens over the next 10 years. I mean, it's mind-boggling how much that tax will affect our utility bills. And so we do have to find a way to offset some of that carbon tax, and I think carbon capture is by far one of the most exciting things for me, because I think everybody's going to have that same issue, and we have lots of pipelines coming our way and lots of means and ways to get that stuff here. So again, I can't tell you, this is probably the single best council meeting that I have sat through in my 4 years. So you've made my day. Thank you.
Wow, that was some really good comments, some good questions from council. You guys have been standing there for a couple hours almost. You ready for one more?
Sure.
I'm going to take a little different approach and ask you a personal question. Eric, you've just moved here, brought your family here, bought a house. Chris, you've been here for a while, volunteering in the community. Both of you come from the private sector. Both of you have had success in the private sector. And then you've come here to work with the city of Medicine Hat. And on a personal, you can take a minute to think, sorry, and I didn't set this up. I probably should have warned you guys, but why? This is a high stress, high visibility job, and so why are you doing it?
I'll take the first stab, Your Worship. Well, so I was born and raised in Medicine Hat, 77 to 97. I moved away for university, moved up to Calgary in 1997. Basically, from my perspective, is really more family driven. I have three daughters, ages 7 through 11, and my 11-year-old won't be with us. She'll be off at university in 6-7 years. So it was really a cognizant choice to just try to slow things down a little bit, move to a smaller community, little better pace of life, and spend more time with my family and slow things down, avoid traffic, avoid stress, all of those things that that'll make you old before your days. But that's really what drove my decision.
Thank you for the question. Similar to Eric, grew up in Southwest Saskatchewan and did junior high school in Medicine Hat, and this has been a home, and this region's been a home for a long time. When you go to university and you go into the private sector and you're working in Toronto's and in the fast-paced environments, it's a different world for sure. But as you come back and you have a family life and with technology and the changing world around being able to do that same job and do that same kind of professional skill set in a smaller urban center, that's going to be something that a bigger trend I think you're going to see. And, I talk about on the waterfront a bit where you have that city-urban life mixed with the outdoor lifestyle. That's going to be pretty powerful going forward, and being able to do that using technology and still work with those big companies, but do it from an urban center like Medicine Hat is something that very much attracts. But there's same thing when you have a family. The nice thing about a community like Medicine Hat is, you can run and tie skates, at lunch hour, or take those breaks and be back in the office. And, when you live in Calgary or Toronto, there's no opportunity to do that kind of stuff. So you got to, the new world is balancing those two between professional life and personal life. So.
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion for reception?
So moved.
I think I had Councilor McIntosh and Friesen, I think, were the first two. And if we could vote? That was unanimous. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Moving on now to reports. Our first report is item 5.1, Administrative and Legislative Review Committee, August 9th, just for information.
So moved.
I will second that.
If we could vote? That was unanimous. Thank you.
The next report is item 5.2, Public Services Committee meeting, August the 9th, with two items for adoption. Number one, the Community Vibrancy Advisory Board Family and Community Support Services contract funding, for 2022 to 23. And second is the Truth and Reconciliation.
With council's indulgence, I'll ask that if we could just deal with these two items separately, and we can
thank
deal with the first item, which is the vibrancy.
And Your Worship, if I could beg the indulgence of council to declare a conflict of interest on this particular item, as my husband's organization is one of the the people who applied for a grant.
Prospective recipient. Perspective.
So did someone move that motion?
I thought Councilor Fraser moved it. Did you move it? Okay, yeah, good point.
So I will move that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. So on item 1, any questions or comments? We have a recommendation. Councilor Hirsch? So, yeah, go ahead, Councilor.
Sure, I was trying to press the button. Just, maybe just a backgrounder as to, I know the applications come in, how are they vetted? Do they get any weighting on, they've already received funding? What's the matrix that they follow in regards to that? If someone can help me understand.
Somebody want to tackle that?
I'm going to suggest, Mr. Chairman, that Managing Director Mastel is probably closest to that process. This question was raised in committee as well, and it is a very good question. It tends to be similar names that are achieving this level of support every year.
Yeah.
But it is a very rigorous process. Brian, can you go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. There is a rigorous process. So for starters, it is FCSS funding. So the guidelines for funding are outlined by the province. And then Medicine Hat, City Council has the Community Vibrancy Advisory Board established to vet all the submissions and build a recommendation. So there was a subset of that newly appointed board. There was 3 members of the 9-member board that went through all the applications. They have an evaluation matrix that they follow that is largely following the FCSS funding guidelines, but then it has a lens for community need and a desire to get to sustainability for an organization. So you will see some names that will come up commonly, but they noted that they are looking at moving closer to sustainability. So the funding is decreasing for some of those organizations, but they are also considering the programs they offer and the need in the community along with that. That 3-member subcommittee reported back to the broader Community Vibrancy Advisory Board on their recommendations, their rationale, had discussion with the broader board to furnish what council has in front of them, which is the recommendation in its entirety. And so that's the process that they follow.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, if we could vote on this. And that was unanimous with Councillor Friesen? Not, thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 2, Truth and Reconciliation. Any questions or comments? Councillor Dumanowski.
Well, Your Worship, I wholeheartedly endorse the item identified here under Truth and Reconciliation. Certainly there's been a lot of attention, rightfully so, paid to the cause, if you will, to this, the need to have every institution, every level of government recall and commit to establishing their response. I appreciate the opportunity for the Community Vibrancy Advisory Board to establish an ad hoc committee, assuming council supports us. When I look at the mandate or the broad mandate identified under the recommendation, obviously this will involve a process. This will, in doing so, involve some time, and recognizing that the likes of FCM are calling for all organizations and levels of government to recognize and respond to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action. We're doing our part. I guess what I'm trying to say is I hope it doesn't come across as token. It certainly ought not come across that way. And for me, it's broad here, and obviously I don't want to fetter or prejudice the outcomes or the goals that the ad hoc committee will establish or come back with recommendations. I guess I, as one councillor, and I'm hoping all of us agree, aren't holding anything back from that ad hoc committee. I hope that they can do a thorough job, and certainly on a moral level, never mind a judicial or government level, we have a duty to support this. But for me, the big part will be the repatriation of remains that we know are that have left Medicine Hat some time ago and are elsewhere in the province, the University of Alberta, I recall. And there's a need for that piece to be reconciled in a significant way, and I especially will be looking forward to that response, and I hope that it will be comprehensively covered under this mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Samraj.
Thank you, Mayor Tluxton. We had a chance to discuss this at Public Services. I was unable to persuade my committee members of my concerns at the time, but maybe I'll have more luck with full council here. I guess my concerns are what Councillor Dumanescu referred to, that this is a token gesture. I think this motion just has no budget attached to it, which in my opinion is a sign that it's not a serious proposal. I mean, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen here. This is the easy part, what we're doing here. When they come back in March with this report, with a list of projects to address a history of injustice in this country, we have no idea what bill that's going to come with here. And then that council is going to have a difficult decision about making, a financial decision about what priorities they're going to make. I mean, we can't fix everything right away. So, I mean, we have to prioritize, and that means budgeting there. I mean, so you're just backloading the difficult conversation about it. I mean, if they come back and say, okay, we've got $1 million worth of projects, what are you going to say then? I guess I'm kind of surprised because some of you guys have been through this before with the senior center at the Primrose thing. You can't give a committee no boundaries when you give them a job to do. I think you're just asking for trouble down the line here. Of course, the intent of this is important and necessary, but it needs to have boundaries. And if this doesn't have boundaries, I won't support it. So I wasn't here last month when this was initiated, so I'll invite whoever brought it forward to table it until that decision is made. Otherwise, I won't support it. Thank you.
Councillor Hirsch.
Well, and it's interesting, and again, I'm not speaking in terms of the intention or the topic. I'm talking about process. So I actually appreciate Councillor Samraj's point, but that's not really my point. As an individual that went through this already at another local institution, the idea of a framework was well received, because realistically, if you have the goalposts a mile wide, it could be just so overwhelming. So what we decided to do was things within our control, and I guess I'm along the same lines as yourself, Councillor Samraj, making sure that the terms of reference is reasonable, expected, and something that we can control, because I've been along the same lines. I could go on to virtuous commentary about every line item on the Truth and Reconciliation report, for sure I could. But the reality is making sure, and I guess this, and my question's going to be, once this ad hoc group gets created, does the parameters and the scope get vetted, for one, and does that, and what I mean by vetted, that will, I presume, run through, the recommendations of the ad hoc group will run through the Vibrancy Committee first, and then to Public Services? Because I do actually want the feedback of our Vibrancy group as a whole as well. So I just want to talk about process and understand that.
Councillor Friesen.
Yeah, thanks. Just to address some of the questions, concerns. First, I'll start with Councillor Dumanowski. Councillor Dumanowski, unfortunately, you weren't able to be with us at the last council meeting, and the repatriation item did come forward. It will come back to us as well as it will not be part of this, but it will be covered. We are working on that, so it's not lost. It will be two separate items, both coming back to council. Secondly, I know that Councillor Samraj expressed his concerns, and I certainly understand. Councillor Hirsch, yours tie in somewhat with process, and I know I asked if we could have something recognized in the notes here, and I'm not sure I'm seeing it, but the intent of this is a kind of a big picture motion required by the bylaw whenever we are giving a special project to the community vibrancy group, that it would have to be approved by, the ad hoc committee would have to be approved by council. That's a departure from the way we used to do our advisory board, so that's one thing. Second thing is, this is meant to be big picture, so it's to give them that mandate to have a look at the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, and as you know, there are many. So the process is not clearly articulated here, and the reason for that is because we're looking for the mandate. We are not yet at a point where we're going to, and we will come back to you. It'll come through the board to committee. They will also work on this ad hoc committee with some Indigenous folks and other community leaders, so it won't be them alone. And we will come back to, through committee, we will come back to council with the terms of reference, which include things like mandate, membership, purpose mandate, membership, you know, the authority they're given or not given, budget, all of that, pardon me, will be in there, because Councillor Samraj makes a good point. I don't want to see anyone set up and say, oh, go off and bring us, you know, all these recommendations, but, and then go, oh, no, we can't afford that. So absolutely good point, well taken. That will have to be articulated, you know, in the terms of reference. So we're not finished with this. This is a beginning point in the process, not an ending point.
Thank you, Councillor Samraj.
I appreciate those comments, Councillor Friesen. I guess the question then is, why don't we have the terms of reference here before we go forward? Why do we need a motion just to initiate a conversation about terms of reference? Again, we're just kicking the can down the road. This, again, like I said, and you know, you guys are welcome to vote for this. This is the easy part. The hard part comes when there's funding obligations attached to, I think, you know, will be a lot of worthy considerations here.
Councillor Varga.
Just a point, great comments through the chair. A lot of these points, though, don't involve us, though, really. It's through the federal government and the provincial government, so there's only certain ones that involve the community, actually, right? So, or are we to follow what happens with the feds and the province, too? I'm not sure how that works. So is the ad hoc committee just going to look at stuff that's individual for the community, or through the government of Alberta and the federal government? I'm not sure, because there's lots of points that they only directed straight at the government of Canada and the provincial government. So are we involved in that process?
If I could respond, Your Worship, I think All valid points. I mean, I don't know the answer because I haven't looked at it yet. But again, the terms of reference have to give direction. I mean, I made this point at Public Services. I sure wouldn't want to be on a committee that I had no idea what I was supposed to do. So that terms of reference is critical. We'll come back with it. If this council chooses not to support that big picture notion first, knowing the terms will come back, it's all right. You can say, no, we want to see them first and deal with this as a whole package. That's totally up to you. I don't think it would be a bad thing either. But I would like to see this, I would like to get the ball rolling on this. It is important. And it is not in any way intended to be just something that we're just doing because we think we should. It's something that we believe needs to be respected, valued, and taken seriously.
Thank you, Councillor Hirsch.
Well, Your Worship, and again, and not to harbor on the fact that I've been down this path before. It was 5 years ago. It was well in advance of the unmarked graves and all the tragedies and all the things have been clearly outlined over the last few months, or more than a few months. But I guess to answer and maybe give a little bit of comfort to Councillor Samraj, the intensity of the effort is more of what does that mean for the city of Medicine Hat? Do we have to change verbiage on some of the policies? Do we have to be more inclusive in some areas? Do we have to be more respectful and in tune in certain areas? So it isn't necessarily as much capital as it is to the paying attention to the nuances of what the document's all about. So I actually look forward to the development of it. I'm looking forward to seeing, within, again, some prescribed goalposts of exactly what the recommendations are. But I don't anticipate it to be, a massive capital investment, quite frankly, as one that's already went down this path and was very involved in it. So, thanks.
Go ahead. You want one more?
Well, I guess with respect to Councillor Hirsch, that's a very optimistic view to take. I mean, the motion is that we're asking a committee to address the spirit of the Truth and Reconciliation report. You're right. I mean, a lot of these things are technically non-financial if it has to do with like bringing city policy in line with some of these ideas. But even then, I mean, it requires staff time to develop, to research, and to make all these things. And you don't want somebody doing this off the side of their desk. So again, there needs to be a budgetary connection to this. Otherwise, I don't see how this is a serious proposal.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, if we can vote. And that passes with one opposed. 8 in favor, 1 opposed.
Item 5.3 is the Corporate Services Committee meeting, August 10th, just for information again.
So moved.
Second.
If we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Item 6.1 was the notice of motion from Councillor Friesen.
Your worship, members of council, just a little bit of a background, and then I'm going to ask for waiving the notice period for notice of motion. The ongoing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic continues to have devastating effects on so many of our residents, and we've talked about this extensively. One of these difficulties can be meeting the expense of utilities on a monthly basis. Right now, with a very hot summer combined with the rates of electricity, the burden of payment may become overwhelming for folks. You'll recall that our council placed additional money into community warmth as part of our COVID relief package earlier on this year. And we have not yet to even release the second tranche, so we do have money available in that fund. In addition, our council at the last meeting announced a rebate, and we said that we hope those who do not need it would donate it back to community warmth. As a reminder, community warmth was established years ago, funded by donations through utility payments and meant to support those who need it the most. And for any of you who don't donate, please do. It's really easy. They just take it off with your utility payment every month. It's a wonderful thing. Folks who are struggling can apply once a year for utility payment relief. So I intend to ask Council for support tonight for a one-year period where 2 applications for utility payment relief is made available. And given that, Your Worship, I move that we waive notice of motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, if we could vote. You have unanimous consent? Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I move that for 1 year, effective today's date, citizens of Medicine Hat are given the opportunity to apply to Community Warmth for utility payment relief twice within the course of the year.
Second that.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Dumanowski?
Your worship, just to understand it clearly, so they can apply twice within the current year, or if they were recipients prior to today's announcement or vote, they could apply a second time in the next current year. In other words, does it matter, or maybe tomato, but are you saying they could apply twice in the next year? Or if they've already applied and been recipients, they have the opportunity within the next year to get a second chance?
Well, the way I worded it, and that you make a good point, but I don't want it to become too complicated. The way I worded it was that the year begins tonight if we vote in favor. So the year from tonight, they can apply up to 2 times rather than only 1. And remember, all of you, that just because you apply doesn't mean you get it. The applications are actually subject to a criteria and assessed by the Salvation Army and St. Vincent de Paul team. The City of Medicine Hat does not make the determination of need.
Councillor Turner?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just a little bit confused now.
Oh, dear.
Are you saying this is going to start tonight?
Yeah.
So what if I applied last week? So does that mean I can apply 2 more times this year?
Well, if you applied last week, your application wouldn't have been vetted yet anyway.
Last month or
Okay.
whatever. I've already applied once this year.
Yeah, I don't know how to change it. I was looking for a way to make it so that it's twice in a year, but if we start fiddling with this, it's going to be very complex to say, okay, when does it start and when does it end? If this council wants this to start a month ago or 2 months ago, you could make that amendment. I'd support that, but I don't want to go too far back because people are struggling and this is part of our COVID
So I guess
relief.
my suggestion would be, let's talk about this calendar year. So from January 1st to December 31st, if you've already applied once, you get to apply again. If you haven't applied, I guess you get a chance to apply twice.
Okay, that's
And
fine.
that would make it quite simple.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, if that's
So
a
I'll make that
friendly
amendment,
amendment.
however
Yeah.
that wording might be.
Yeah, that's a good compromise. However, there are only 4 months left in this year. And so you'd be applying for September, and then you get into arrears, and you apply again in November. I can see abuse.
I know, that's why I
Yeah.
was trying to make it for 1 year. I don't want to lose this momentum. I think people really are struggling, and we've got the money in there. Okay, then why don't you make another friendly
Well, sorry,
amendment?
or we just refer it to staff to come forward.
Yeah,
to
that'll work too.
Mr. Chairman, that would be appreciated. When we try and do these on the fly, we can get into those kind of challenges.
Yeah.
We can have it before council in your next open meeting.
And it can be either retro for the year or this calendar year starting September when we have the next council meeting. Is that okay?
Okay, so I'll make my motion then to refer to staff to come back with a recommendation based on the spirit and intent of
Yeah. I think
my
that would-
motion. Okay, that's perfect, thank you.
You okay with
And then
that?
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. Motion to figure out a plan for staff to come back with a possibility of 2 applications per year or calendar year. Okay, if we could vote? It was unanimous, thank you. Seeing no more business before this council, we're adjourned.